those people, they can be fun, they can be really creative, they can be really good at like sensing out vibes and designs and things like that. They have like a lot of like benefits in certain circumstances, but a lot of like the obsessive compulsive types tend to see them as like annoying and useless.
Welcome to Open Therapy. This is the official podcast of the Open Therapy Institute. And I am Megan Daum, your moderator, and I'm here with Andrew Hartz, clinical psychologist and founder of Open Therapy Institute, and author and social psychologist Rob Henderson. Hello. How are you guys doing?
Good, Megan. How are you?
Good. I am so excited for this conversation today because we're talking about a subject close to my heart, which is my personal neuroses, seen through the filter of a very serious scholarly work by Nancy McWilliams. So maybe before we get into this, we should touch on what this book is. I know we talked about it last time, but just as a recap.
Yeah. It's called Psychoanalytic Diagnosis. I don't have it in front of me today, but it's probably the most widely used psychoanalytic textbook that there is. And it's a summary of key things from defense mechanisms to personality types to some other things we might get into sometime, like levels of personality organization, which is things like this.
Not personal organization, not a personal organizer.
No, it's not so complicated. You basically rate like the severity of personality problems from like neurotic to borderline to psychotic, and depending on how severe they are. And this is a and all the terms that psychoanalysts use have been a lot of them have been reappropriated by the rest of the field and redefined differently just to make everything super confusing. But there's all different kinds of concepts and tools like that in the book, and it's very widely used and it's excellently written.
When you say widely used, do you mean not just in school, but like then with practicing psychologists, they would refer to it frequently?
People refer to it. I don't know how often people are cracking it open, but yeah, I'll talk to my supervisor and I'll have a case. He'll be like, it's like good to look back at that or something. And because it's full of like these little insights and you can kind of miss it, that it'll say something and it's like a sentence and you're like, it's actually a pretty big claim. It's like, people with, like this is in a different chapter, but people who like joke around and have a kind of what's called a hypomanic personality style. It's not a manic episode. It's not bipolar. It's a hypomanic personality style. They joke around a lot. They have like, those people are really prone to being flighty, to like ending treatment abruptly without explanation. And there's just things like that you kind of like notice, or there's little things and it could just be a sentence or something, and it's got actually like a lot of claims about what you might want to think about as a therapist. And it's easy on one read to miss a lot.
Andrew is probably at least the second clinician who's told me about this book. So I've heard about it before. I had it on my Kindle even before he recommended it to me, but I only started reading it because Andrew had mentioned it. So I picked it up somewhere along the way. Someone told me about it a long time ago. And as I will regularly stress on this podcast, I'm not a clinical psychologist. At some point I should write this essay that I'm a psychologist, but not the kind that helps people. Academic psychologist, so I'm interested in human behavior broadly speaking, but I did not have any clinical training. So a lot of this is interesting and fresh and new to me as well. So it's been fun to make my way through it. But I did. I'm glad we're covering this topic because I have a little bit of knowledge about it. I wrote a commentary with my PhD supervisor years ago. Sort of responding to this big paper, but we did cite some work on obsessive compulsive disorder and obsessive compulsive personality disorder, and it was through the process of writing that commentary that I learned that these are two different things entirely. So in everyday conversation, people will say, if they're very well organized, they'll say like, "Oh, I'm OCD about how I arrange my shoes or how my desk is organized or whatever." But in fact, that's more characteristic of OCPD, obsessive compulsive personality disorder. And so the way that I understood these two different disorders is that OCD, one way to think about it is OCD involves unwanted and intrusive thoughts. And often the person who's experiencing it, they don't like it. It's unwanted, these thoughts and the subsequent compulsive behaviors, but they can't help it. They do it anyway, even though they kind of know that it is self-defeating. Whereas for obsessive compulsive personality disorder, their behavior to them feels correct and justified, and it's everyone else who's screwing up. So I'm well organized. I'm diligent. I keep everything clean. I stick to a schedule, and I don't know why other people don't do this. And maybe this is related, kind of in the Freudian terminology of like anal retentive personality style. And so OCD involves often repetitive cleansing, sort of hand washing, checking if the door is locked repeatedly, counting bricks in the wall or tiles on the ground, and it's compulsive, and often it feels annoying to the person who's undergoing it. And then OCPD, there can be a preoccupation with cleanliness. But also with orderliness, often miserly. They often don't like to spend money. They're sort of stingy in that way. They like to cling to things. And also OCD is generally associated, I think, with sort of lower success in the workplace. This is often a very severely debilitating disorder that can interfere with functioning and personal relationships and in career. But there is a slight positive correlation between OCPD traits and success in the workplace. In other words, people with OCPD often do well in terms of work because they're so organized and because they are so diligent and focused. And so, these are different traits entirely, even though in everyday language we can conflate them.
Okay. We should say that in this textbook, Nancy McWilliams, I mean, my reading was that this obsessive personality, there's almost this like moral valence to it, like in a way. It's this idea that you're sort of managing your anxiety around like not only loss of control, but moral failure, or like this idea that if you don't keep it together at all times, not only will something bad happen, which I think is kind of more of a like classic OCD thing, or the OCD thing that many people are most familiar with, but that like you're a bad person. So I would love to tease that out a little more, Andrew. Like, how do you kind of metabolize this?
I guess it's an overactive superego. It's, the moralistic kind of part of the mind that is judging and inhibiting and controlling and regulating is like really overpowering. It's interesting, like with obsessive compulsive personality style, what we read the chapter on, which has a lot in common with OCPD. A lot of the morality is more about shame versus guilt. And like shame, at least in this context, is more like I didn't perform well, as opposed to I hurt somebody. So guilt is like I actually hurt somebody and I feel bad that I hurt them. And then I maybe want to repair about that because I feel bad that I hurt somebody. But a lot of the morality in OCPD, nobody's impacted. It's like I didn't perform well and I feel bad about my performance, but it's not necessarily, and those two things are really conflated. A lot of times people feel what they're harshest with themselves about is actually not performing well, as opposed to hurting people, which I think people aren't, just in general, are not as hard on themselves. It varies, but sometimes they're not as hard on themselves for actually doing something that really hurts someone as not performing well. But it is kind of an inability to to regulate the superego. It's just over moralizing and over controlling.
Okay. And to be clear here, we are talking about obsessive personality, not obsessive compulsive personality. What exactly are we talking about in this?
No.
Chapter?
Yeah.
Let's isolate this.
Well, I mean, this is actually really good because there is just this kind of like total mess of language throughout psychoanalysis where every term has lots of different definitions and they're all disputed. And the title of the chapter, I think, was obsessive compulsive personality. On other places, like Shapiro's work on character styles, which this is really influenced by, it's obsessive personality styles. Yeah. So they're kind of like, but they're very similar and they're given different, it's so unnecessarily confusing, but it's kind of like, I think the terminology is kind of like, I don't know, they try to make it as hard as possible.
Okay. But I mean, she makes a big deal about talking about sort of defense mechanisms versus behavior, right? So, and it's sort of like, what are we behaving a certain way out of like a kind of uncontrollable sort of repetition impulsion, for instance, or because somehow we think if we do this, like nobody will be mad at us or we'll be a good person and we can control things as much as possible, or like at least they won't be mad at me. And I relate to this in a very sort of radical, visceral way, and maybe we can get to that down the road. But I want to make sure that we kind of sharpen our focus here as much as possible. Like, why are we talking about this chapter? And actually, why did this chapter jump out at you, Andrew, as something that you wanted to talk about?
Well, I thought you really wanted to talk about it, which is part of what I wanted to do. But to me, well, it's really, really important that people's superego, their kind of internal guilting and shaming and self-critical faculty, is often totally disconnected from actual morality. There's actual morality, and then there's what this internal moralistic thing that's happening psychologically for us, and they're totally separate. And it's often really, really important to make that case to patients who are overly harsh, because people buy into it so much. They really listen to that moral critical voice as if it's God's truth, and they believe that, and they get totally sucked into it. And really often it could be as easy as writing down what the criticism is, and you realize this doesn't impact anything. Nobody's going to care. This is so harsh, and it's over nothing. And it's like you're on a good example would be like, maybe not related to OCPD necessarily, but you're on a date. You have a piece of spinach in your teeth the whole time. You don't get called back. She doesn't want to see you again. And you could beat yourself up about that for years. And it just doesn't matter. Nobody was hurt. She probably doesn't even remember it happened or whatever. It's just like, it's over. But people moralize it. There's no moral dimension to that. But it becomes moralized, and that's a big part of what drives this. Drives, I think, OCPD in part.
One thing this chapter highlighted for me was obsessive behavior, or I guess obsessive, which she calls it obsessive character structure, is separate from compulsive character structure. So these aren't always connected. And she uses this example here of, she says, Nancy McWilliams, professors of philosophy sometimes have obsessional but not compulsive character structure. So philosophers get pleasure and self-esteem from mentation, but feel no pressure to implement their ideas. So they become obsessed with something mentally, but they don't necessarily act it out in any way. And then she says, as an example, people drawn to something like accounting or carpentry can have this compulsion to behave in some way, even if there's very little in the way of cognitive elaboration or mental obsession with something. But they feel this compulsive desire to deal with numbers or with woodworking or what have you. And so these two things can go together and often do, but they are separate. And so that was really interesting for me. But yeah, I liked the examples that she used, and Yeah, the moralistic element I found fascinating, and that, you know, the distinction Andrew pointed out between guilt versus shame, and Nancy McWilliams offers this commentary about how, like in Freud's time, it was maybe more of a guilt-based culture where people sort of internalized if they didn't do something right, they were a bad person. Whereas now, and she's, you know, using these examples, I think, from maybe clinical observation or everyday life of now, if someone does something wrong, they'll, you know, what will other people think if I do this? It's not so much I'm a bad person if I do this. It's, oh, what are my friends and family going to think if they learn this about me, of being sort of discovered or unmasked in some way.
Yeah. And going back to what you're saying about the obsessive versus compulsive, it's kind of like you could think of thinking versus doing. And the piece that's missing often in both of them is feeling. Like they tend to be not connected. So, going back, Megan, you weren't there, but Rob and I a while ago, and hopefully we'll be able to release this, but we had a conversation. Freud's model, you really think about certain areas of the psyche being over concentrated with like your with psychic energy, like you're very involved with certain areas of the mind and then under involved with others. And one of the key variables here is like thinking versus feeling, and doing versus feeling. And there are certain personality styles, like I'd say hysterical personality style in particular, where they're feeling a ton, but they're not thinking very, very much. And there are a lot of people like that. And then there's other people, like I think especially the OCD type, where they're obsessive compulsive personality type, where they're thinking a ton, but they really have a hard time feeling.
Okay.
And a lot of times why people, like the psychoanalytic theory, like why do people obsess in maybe more OCD terms, or even like general anxiety terms, like why do people like worry so much in the wheel spin? It's often like they're thinking a lot to avoid a feeling, and their mind is racing thinking about all this stuff, because if they stop their thoughts for a second, they'd feel something that they don't want to feel.
Yeah, well, don't knock my hobbies. Part of the reason this resonated with me so much is because I think that I definitely have these tendencies, and I definitely sort of, you know, as soon as I feel a feeling and it's uncomfortable, I will start to do whatever's necessary to kind of sculpt it into something else. And whether that's like intellectualizing it or turning it into an artistic expression or something like that, like I want to take it and make it into a sort of a discrete entity. And then I feel like I've built something, I've accomplished something, I've made something, and maybe that thing is going to, you know, have an impact on other people, you know, a positive one, that sort of thing. But is that, I always see that as a strength, but maybe it's maybe there are downstream effects that are negative.
It sounds like a strength. I mean, a lot of these all have strengths. It's also like everybody has defense mechanisms. So I don't think like it's not like there's anybody that's not going to use any defense mechanisms. It's kind of like, I think with a lot of these things, like they work until they don't. And then there's usually like a point where a particular strategy for dealing with distress isn't optimal anymore and you need something else. But like a hysterical person, somebody that's more of that character type, they're like upset about something and they just need to like share what they feel and have you know that, and then they let it go, and it's like that actually is meaningful. But to the obsessive person, it just feels like a waste of time. Like, why are we doing this? It doesn't, it's not going anywhere, but it's like actually this emotion is being processed by just some type of mutual acknowledgement or something, and there's no real answer, but there's this interpersonal mutual acknowledgement process or something, and then they feel okay and they move on to feeling the next thing. And those people, they can be fun, they can be really creative, they can be really good at like sensing out vibes and designs and things like that. They have like a lot of like benefits in certain circumstances, but a lot of like the obsessive compulsive types tend to see them as like annoying and useless. Like, because they don't like all the emotion. Like, it's like their worst nightmare.
Okay.
what Megan was describing, that sounds like sublimation. Is that right? Of sort of taking these feelings and then channeling them into productive work, which is supposedly one of the healthier defense or mature, I guess, mature defense mechanisms.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you for calling
Yeah,
me
turning.
mature.
Yeah, of course. Like you're turning it into. Well, you're taking like something upsetting and you're turning it into work and like that sound like into like a product that you can share with people. And yeah.
But then it becomes something else. See, I think it is a form of running away from the thing because you're not actually dealing with the feelings. You've just converted them into like another entity. And then, and you've kind of made that, and then you can sort of tell yourself to move on. I mean, I found this stuff so interesting because I feel like I operate on a system of guilt. Like I'm always afraid that somebody's mad at me or that I've done something. I mean, and this is just like absolutely fundamental. I mean, I remember just being a small child. It was always, I'm going to get in trouble. I'm going to be in trouble. I'm going to be in trouble. I'm going to be in trouble. And I would have dreams that I committed a crime or that I, got in trouble or something like that. I mean, this happens to this day. And I'm not sure it is shame. I mean, there are things I feel shame over, but the constant guilt and feeling like somebody is displeased with me for some reason, it is like inescapable for me.
Sure. Were your parents really harsh?
I mean, they had me on a very short leash. It was like I was an extension of them. There's that whole sort of vertical versus horizontal identity thing. Like Andrew Solomon talks about this in Far From the Tree. Like there's parents who see their children as an extension of them, and then there's parents, and I guess that's a vertical identity. Like when parents see their children as like a branch on the tree below them, and we're the same tree. And then there's parents who can kind of see their children as separate from them. And so and he talks about that in that book, like if there's a disabled child or, a child that is extremely gifted in a way that nobody else is, there's a separation. But my parents were just like, no, you're an extension of us and you are our chief representative on earth. So if you do the slightest thing, if somebody catches you making a driving mistake, out on the road and they know that you're our daughter, then we're going to be very displeased. And so that is just sort of like with me always.
Oh, yeah. So you kind of like, I mean, that's interesting because it's like your parents sounded like anxious.
Well, they were very insecure, and I think they were, they had this real self-made quality. But I think that they were just, they were not interested in us as individuals. They were interested in us as part of them. So,
Yeah. Yeah, so you kind of like, I think it's like, it's a great example to me of like, and maybe this isn't quite it, but I'm thinking about it sounded like your parents were like very anxious about shame and judgment of others. And then they're communicating that to you. And
yeah.
It doesn't even necessarily, maybe it was like explicit verbal, like don't do this or people will, but a lot of it is like unstated. And I think it's really interesting the way that like a family dynamic can communicate non-verbally, like super intense states. And then it's like, and it's not necessarily like it's not like, oh, you were like systematically abused in this particular way for all these years,
right.
But it's like these really pointed emotions still get communicated, and like you're kind of inculcated and like encouraged to internalize them. Most families have like an emotional style as a family that they try to like, there's like rules about what emotions you can express and not express and what defense mechanisms are good versus bad, and they kind of like, and I think it's true for obsessive compulsive too, like where they teach like never be late, always, do this, and like keep your room clean, and those are the important things. And like the fact that like we're not like warm or open with each other doesn't matter, or like emotion in general is discouraged or whatever, like there are these things and they get internalized, and the parents don't need to be like bad parents per se, like in any like sense, to like communicate things that end up really dominating the psychology of the kid.
I mean, Rob, I mean, given what you've written and shared about your background, I mean, it seems like it would make perfect sense that you would need to decouple your emotional life from the reality of your life. I mean, you grew up in the foster care system. You did not have a stable parent dynamic until you were really a teenager. And maybe this is exactly sort of illustrative of my point, but as I was talking about my situation, I was thinking, oh God, like Rob must be rolling his eyes. Like he had like real problems, real challenges in this area. And here you are with your, stupid overbearing parents.
Maybe this is another example of me using intellectualizing as a defense against my feelings. But as you guys were talking, I just thought of what McWilliams wrote about, and this is a common charge against like psychoanalytic frameworks, is that they're unfalsifiable. I think that the like psychoanalytic approaches, psychodynamic approaches are brilliant when it comes to observations and when it comes to sort of explaining and understanding people. But when it comes to etiology, I still remain skeptical of. Like childhood, partially because when McWilliams is trying to explain the childhood roots of obsessive and compulsive character structure, first she gives this example of, well, if you have these kind of overbearing helicopter parents who inculcate guilt, and then this leads the person to always want to do the right thing and so on, otherwise they'll experience this guilt because that's how they were raised with these overbearing parents. Then she goes on to say, but if you have neglectful parents, then the response is often to create a sort of imaginary parent that becomes this kind of abstract superego. You're kind of building the parent you never had, and you're trying to live up to this, and you're overcompensating for your lack of guidance by creating this sort of imaginary mentor whose ideals you're trying to live up to. And so I'm like, okay, so if you have a helicopter parent, you're going to become obsessive. If you don't have a parent, you're going to be upset. Like, well, then what can we really explain?
I am so torn up about this question, like a lot as a therapist, because I really don't want to. I would want to improve my patients' relationships with their families. I would want them to get better. I don't want to make them hate their parents because of something that's happening in therapy. But the metaphor that it really packs such an emotional punch when people are talking about the feeling they feel now, and they're like, I remember feeling this as a kid and this thing happened. And it's usually like full of emotion and super connected. Like it perfectly encapsulates their personality. Like these childhood stories can be like so rich in terms of like capturing things about people. And so I don't want to like lose that's like such a powerful portal to like somebody's story and how they experience their personality developing. But like I am somebody who's like, yeah, there's a lot of genetic a lot of this is genetic, and like other things. And like I wouldn't want to walk away being like, that incident that you described when you had the birthday cake or whatever was what caused everything. Like I want to be careful about that, but I do want to but that birthday cake story is probably like really important, like to them. And I'm kind of like, I often feel like I'm walking a line from like, I don't want to, I think that they're so emotionally rich and clinically rich, and yet there's this danger to them that the person like then yells at their mom, you did the birthday cake thing. And that was my life was, right. It's like, you don't want that. I feel like it's a very tough tightrope.
Yeah. And you see these rising rates in parental estrangement of adults cutting off contact with their parents and this kind of thing. And some of it is no doubt warranted, but I think, if we over-index on parenting, then we're losing sight of, there are other factors. Andrew, you mentioned, there are genetic predispositions, but then there's also peer influences too. If you ask a lot of people to think about their most formative experiences in their youth, they often think about, the time that their friends had them do something, or they were mocked or laughed at or ridiculed, and those are often at least as painful as anything that they had experienced with their parents. So peer influences can be very powerful too. But one thing to Megan's original question of, did I relate to any of this through my own upbringing? Well, so I did have, essentially long stretches of neglectful and absentee parenting. And so, I did connect with McWilliams' idea of, basically having to like collect fragments of people that I admired and then trying to sort of live out the life of a person or I guess live up to the ideals of this sort of imaginary mentor or parent figure because I didn't have one. And I do feel that I'm a naturally lazy person. And so I work extra hard to essentially like outrun that laziness. And there's some very nice quotes here in this book. She cites Freud, McWilliams. She says Freud believed that conscientiousness, fastidiousness, frugality, and diligence of obsessive compulsive people were reaction formations against wishes to be irresponsible, messy, profligate, and rebellious, and that one could discern in the over-responsible style of such individuals a hint of the inclinations against which they struggled. And so I feel that so one of the things about me is like I will agree to do things. I'll my schedule is often very full, but if any of it gets canceled, my immediate response is relief.
Oh
Of,
yeah.
like, thank God I don't have to do that. And then why did I agree to do that in the first place? And thank God, like I can just relax. I can rest. Like even big things that I worked hard in order to achieve. If I get a group of people together for an event or something, and then they start dropping out, I'm like, good. Now I don't have to do it. Even though I had spent months prior to that trying to pull this thing off. So yeah, I just feel this natural kind of indolence of unwillingness to put in any effort. But I know this about myself, and so I just try to work extra hard to stay organized and on top of things. And so that's it's I feel very seen by some of those observations by McWilliams.
I guess, I mean, how common is it that people have an emotion, but they think that they actually don't deserve to have it? I mean, it's like, well, I'm having this emotion, but it's actually not appropriate. Or like, I'm angry at my mother, but I know I shouldn't be. And it's sort of like the unreliable narrator syndrome. Like, well, actually, she probably didn't do that, or I'm overreacting, or I'm being unfair. But yet you have this just baseline rage. But part of the baseline is thinking that you shouldn't be having it. And it's just that can be a tyranny.
Yeah, totally. I mean, it's hard to say without knowing like what it might be in the specific thing, but it could be like, I think a lot of times when people are really stuck on a particular feeling, there's another feeling underneath it. So like if you're really angry at your mother over this thing, but beneath that anger is like feeling deprivation or sadness or loneliness, or there's something else that's like beneath it that is exacerbating it. So, or, I mean, yeah, I don't know. Or it could be maybe there's a belief or something. But what you described, that would be my first reaction thought. It's like there's another that's more painful. Like some people anger is easy and it's their go-to, and whenever they feel anything negative, they go to anger. And then there's other people who can't experience it even when they really need to, and usually they'll get depressed instead. I feel like that's probably the most common.
Yeah, for a lot of these emotions, there's also evolutionary frameworks for explaining them. I mean, something like anger, there's this the bargaining theory of anger, which is essentially that anger evolved to help us to negotiate for our own interests, to advocate for ourselves. So if you feel like you're being exploited or mistreated in some way, anger is actually adaptive, because then you will start to advocate for your interests, and you're essentially trying to recalibrate how much value the other person places on you, which is one reason among others we usually get angrier or experience anger more often at close loved ones than to strangers.
Oh, yeah.
Because we expect our loved ones to value us and to place a lot of importance on our welfare. So if they mistreat us, we're naturally going to respond with anger versus a complete stranger. Well, they don't care about us anyway, so we're not going to waste anger on them. And yeah, with shame and guilt and these other things, I mean, these are important emotions to navigate the social world. But the question of like having those feelings towards your mom or something, and then not wanting to feel that, could this also be related to that kind of like the pre-rational cognition of like this very sort of like base irrational mode of thinking of the self and the world are inseparable. So if I think something, then magically, if I think like, oh, I'm angry at my mother, then magically something bad is going to happen to her. So I can't feel that toward her because I don't want her to be hurt. That kind of thing.
That's like, that feels like OCD, like step on a crack, you'll break your mother's back thing.
Something like that. And so you have, what is it, like this unconscious belief that you have omnipotent control. And so I better not think anything bad about anyone because if something harms them, then it's your fault. It's my fault. Whoever has that thought. So
yeah, I mean, there was an argument along these lines that I heard that was really interesting. It was arguing for why you should let kids play with toy guns, and the argument is because they're just playing. But when you tell them you can't play with a gun, you're kind of telling them it's wrong to imagine aggression. That imagining aggression is just as dangerous as aggression or something. You kind of communicate that to them, and that actually having play that has aggressive themes is a way of saying it's okay to, in the context of play, fantasize about things. And that when you kind of forbid play that has aggressive themes, you're kind of teaching them to equate.
That's castration.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, isn't that kind of like the psychological castration of, you can't be aggressive, you can't be, you can't show any kind of emotion or anger or something like that. I remember when I was a kid, I don't know if this still happens, it's probably even worse now. But I remember in the playground, boys would get into fights, and then the teachers or whoever would say, well, it doesn't matter who started it. You both were involved in this fight, in this altercation. You're both equally guilty. And so some kids responded by just immediately yielding to the bullies. Like, yeah, you can have my lunch money. You can take whatever you want from me. Just please don't hurt me. I don't want to get in trouble. And then the bullies would respond to this by just saying, well, nothing's ever totally my fault. If I punch you and take your money and you try to fight back, we're both equally culpable for this. And so the bullies enjoyed that rule that, hey, it doesn't matter who started it. Anyone who's involved in any kind of fight, you're equally culpable for this. And so, yeah, I just feel like that had, for a lot of kids, I could see like this, it did something to them. It disabled something within them that wanted to fight back.
Oh, that's really interesting. It's also, but it is worth just highlighting on this thing about like thought versus imagining. Anger is not the same as aggression. The fact that those things get confused so much, I think, really highlights like what you were saying, Rob. Like anger is not the same as aggression. Feeling angry and letting yourself understand that you're angry about something and that you want to address a problem is different from acting aggressively and actually going out and trying to hurt people. And it's crazy how often those two things are just totally conflated.
It's so, and I'm thinking about this whole like playing with guns thing, playing with toy guns. It's like such a 70s parenting thing. Like, I wonder how much inadvertent damage was done by this kind of like post 60s, kind of like post second wave feminism, trying to like, blank slateism, boys and girls are the same, trying to get rid of aggression. I mean, my mother was very much a product of that. So I was a kid in the 70s, and, my brother, like, she definitely had this idea that he was not going to have a gun. Like, I was not going to have a Barbie doll, and he was not going to have a gun because these are terrible. And, this is the patriarchy. And I don't think she actually used that word to her credit, but all the obvious things.
So
and
what'd you play with? What'd you have?
You got the gun, he got the Barbie.
Hated all I played with stuffed animals. I hated all dolls, which might be a whole other topic, and I've actually written about this. I could not stand dolls. I was just repelled by them, but I love stuffed animals and any animal. But no, I mean, we had like Legos and that, kind of like creative play sort of thing. I mean, it was the 70s, so there was this whole kind of like weird Scandinavian influence with toys, but we had like the Fisher-Price toys. But it was a fool's errand. There was no way, because everybody knows, like a little boy and some girls will like, if they don't have a stick, even they'll pick up their hand and do this. Like it's just a natural impulse. And she got worn down. I mean, I think first she started to allow like, if it was like a laser gun or like Star Wars related, then that was okay. And then if it was a water gun, that was okay. And then I think she just was slowly
And if it was a real gun,
in.
it was okay.
But yeah, now we all have to go. No, but I mean, but it was very much this kind of like this sort of parenting ethos that started in that era. And it continued on for a really long time. And I wonder how much actual aggression it instigated instead of tamping down, and anger.
Well, they're very. I mean, it indicates the extent to which they're uncomfortable with those feelings. I don't know that there is like a perfect sweet spot of exactly like you do have to regulate your emotions. You do need like limits in some certain ways, but it's like, but we all have them. Everybody's a little bit uncomfortable with some of the things they feel. Yeah, it does seem, it seems like it's puritanical. I mean, I can imagine a Bible Belt parent having similar attitude of like, you can't play this, you can't listen to this, or whatever.
Oh, yeah.
You can't, it's like you
can't dance. Yes.
Yeah,
we also
yeah.
have Footloose.
That's right. Were you allowed to dance?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, no, music. Yeah. It was arts, but it was very like, you could do the arts and you can do school and everything. But no, football would have been verboten. I mean, a lot of this just had to do with my parents.
Even for a girl.
Individual. Well, so we could have played soccer, but yeah,
Okay.
no, look, I don't want to conflate this. A lot of this had to do with my particular parents, like particular nerves. But yeah, no, I just think that there was a movement at that time. It was this kind of like peacenik, sort of 70s peace love, kind of hippie coming out of like, they were rebelling against their, 1950s, very sort of oppressive in all the standard ways, upbringings, and it definitely overcompensated. And I do notice, for what it's worth, and again, I think this might be worthy of a whole other episode, a lot of the people in our space, the kind of like, whatever you want to call it, sort of dissident thinkers and heterodox, people who don't like groupthink, if they sort of tend sort of center or center right, there's a big faction of them that grew up with very liberal parents who they're very angry at. Their parents were chaotic, divorced, not really, the parents thought that they were on the right side of history by not enforcing like, sort of more conservative norms. And so the parents were like bringing, getting divorced and bringing step parents into the house and being negligent. I mean, my generation, Gen X, was like the latchkey generation, right? Like we were the ones like literally had a key around our necks because we would come home from school and the mothers would be working. So I think there's a lot of anger at that kind of parenting style, and it's coming out in this new sort of trad thing that you see among millennials and Gen Xers.
That fits so well. I mean, if I was going to give a person, it's not in the Nick Williams book, but my personality style to probably like that heterodox movement or whatever is probably oppositional. There's a lot of oppositional people. And I definitely have that of kind of like, it can be a fault because if you're reflexively opposed to everything,
yes,
like,
I would
it's
say
like,
I'm
it's
not a
Good.
contrarian.
Yeah, exactly.
How dare you call me a contrarian? I am not. Yeah. And also, Rob, I'm curious what you think of this, like, because I have this, as I described earlier, this fear of being in trouble or judged or people being mad at me. But that is entirely in my personal life. In my public life, as a writer and as a thinker and as a talker, I don't care if people are mad at me, then I'm doing my job. Like, you can hate me all you want in terms of my public expression and my ideas. But if somebody in my personal life is offended because I insulted them or was like late to dinner or something like that, it's intolerable.
Yeah, I'm definitely with you on the former of if people are upset with something I say, or, there have been, I don't know, probably 5, 6, 7 different lengthy essays attempting to debunk my luxury beliefs idea. And I always just think good, like they're writing about it, they're talking about it, they're getting it out there. And even if, I disagree with, I think, 90% of these critiques, but I'm just glad that, they're thinking about it.
It's a sign of
and
success.
Exposing their writing or exposing their readers to the idea. But personal life, I don't know. I'm not I don't like when people are upset with me. Yeah, if I'm late to something, or if I say I'm going to do something, I will work extra hard to make sure that I do it. If I make a promise, live up to my word, that kind of thing, and I feel doubt or like shame, or just wanting to make sure that the people I care about can trust me or think of me as a trustworthy person. But yeah, it's like the heterodox thing is interesting. I've noticed this too, that a lot of the people they're rebelling against maybe their own parenting, the kind of maybe the progressive overreach in the culture, of wanting to have some boundaries and some rules and some guardrails of, I guess, the classic kind of parent-child conflict was, having those very conservative parents, and then the kids want to be rebellious and liberal and be very individualistic and free, but then that ethos took over the culture, and now you have the sort of the boomer liberal parents, and everyone wants to rebel against that generation. And it's expressing itself in very strange ways. I saw this Substack essay the other day, basically saying, this woman wrote this piece, like her daughters really love Sabrina Carpenter, her teenage daughters love Sabrina Carpenter, and the mom had the writer of this piece had some doubts about it, but then also said, well, there are worse people to admire. And then she cited I think she was a young female country music singer who dressed very modestly, and said that's actually worse because she, she's training herself to be submissive, to avoid acknowledging her own sexuality, whereas Sabrina Carpenter is openly and knowingly pandering to the male gaze, and that's more empowering. And I'm reading this, and
a lot
I'm
of
thinking,
gymnastics in this piece.
Yeah, that is very
this is like a contortionist, intellectual contortionist.
But that to me is so characteristic of that kind of boomer liberal thinking of actually being very sexually open and provocative. That's what empowerment looks like, of attempting to profit off of your own sex appeal. That's what I would rather my daughters be doing than attempting to be more sort of modest and I guess careful or something. And no, I think there's definitely a backlash to that.
It also just to go back to the Sabrina Carpenter thing, it's also really evaluating all of these stars with these moral judgments. Like it's so moralistic about who cares what the musicians are wearing. It's like I think that there's a lot of and I do think that is something that maybe it was always. I mean, Megan, you would probably know if given your parents, but I felt like the hyper moralism on the left wasn't really there. 20 years ago, anywhere near. It kicked on.
Oh yeah, no, it's gotten much worse. I mean, I think my parents, they were definitely, but they were liberals in a kind of they had sort of working class Union Democrat backgrounds. I mean, it was more. They saw themselves as poor, and that's why they were liberals. It was really more that they didn't like rich Republicans. But no, they would have hated the woke stuff. I mean, I have no doubt. Even in some cases, they were sort of. My mother was sort of prone to capture when it came to certain ideas, but I have no doubt that she would have absolutely rejected this stuff. I hope so anyway. But yeah, no, I mean, there's different shades of it. I mean, you have to realize that, like, the mother that is, kind of deciding that Sabrina Carpenter is a better role model than this, trad country music star. She probably grew up in the 50s where they were like, the school dance going around with a ruler, like, how short is your skirt, or how are you, you're not allowed to get, closer than 10 inches away from your partner when you're dancing with them. I mean, that stuff was for real. And so these things are so cyclical. Like, that's the thing. It's like, it's just going to keep flipping back and forth because people are reactive. You're absolutely right.
You think there's the libertine left is going to reemerge and let go of their moral judgments, and
yeah,
I don't know, because there's such a harsh ideology that I can't see. Going anywhere.
But they're reacting. But yeah, they're picking and choosing. That's the thing. It's like, a sex worker is fine, but God forbid if you agree with Trump on anything, you're dead to them. So yeah,
yes.
I mean, you can have sex in exchange for money, and that's fine. But if you have sex in exchange for a promotion, that should be,
right. So, I know exactly.
Right.
Yeah. Or. we should talk about this sometime. I saw some discourse online, like that a lot of these like young guys think that like basically all girls are hookers because even going out to dinner, that a girl would go that these young women are like surviving by going out on dates so they can get free dinners. And I've just never heard of anybody going on a date to get free food like that. That's something a guy would think.
I saw some study on this that like there is like a surprisingly high, and like I don't know if this is replicated or not, but something like 20 or 25% of young women supposedly they report that they have agreed to go on a date simply for the meal. And so online I saw this referred to as foodie calls.
Oh, brilliant.
And I think personally, I couldn't imagine suffering through a meal with someone I wouldn't want to talk to just for the meal. I'd rather eat something less appetizing at home and not deal with interacting with someone I don't want to talk to versus like pretending to enjoy a conversation just so I could eat a certain kind of dinner or something. That's to me completely insane. But there are people out. But so if it's if that idea of thinking of every girl is a hooker, well then, would this not imply that every man is essentially what is a sugar daddy, right?
Or a John. I mean, a client.
Actually, that's better.
Yeah. Well, maybe this is a foodie culture thing, though, too, because I guess, was when I was like, in my 20s, for instance, the foodie culture thing had not taken off yet. So the idea that you would go, the idea that someone was going to take you out and spend hundreds and hundreds of dollars on some like weird esoteric, take you to the French Laundry. Like I will endure any terrible conversation so I can go to the French Laundry or some like fabulous.
Yeah, maybe like in the era of social media.
Maybe because you want to Instagram your actually.
So
you're
suffering
right.
through 2 hours with someone you hate, but you get the Instagram story and the picture.
Yes.
And that's worth the trade-off of the 2 hours of annoying conversation.
I think you nailed it. I think that's absolutely right. So another reason that social media has ruined the world.
That's so wild.
Wow. Well, okay. We've been talking for an hour, if not a little bit longer. Is there anything anything more you want to say about this chapter of Nancy McWilliams?
Oh, there's a lot I could
we have
say.
a lot.
I'm not sure. Yeah,
we can continue next time, but
I would say like there is a broad. This was my thing we didn't get to, but like one of them. But there's this broad difference, like a really important personality variable to therapists. I think is the thinking versus feeling variable. Do you lean towards thinking? Do you lean towards feeling? And I do think that it does broadly map onto the political spectrum. That there does seem to be association that the left leads with feeling and the right leads with thinking. Mm-hmm. And it's something where I kind of could almost imagine people on the right and the left both agreeing with that framing and kind of like people on the left liking that they're empathic and feel, and
Right.
and people on the right liking that they're thinking and they're not feel. Like I could kind of see both sides almost kind of like maybe agreeing with it, and it's where their strengths are and where their like blind spots are I think often really predicted by
Yeah,
that
I mean,
thinking
is
versus
it kind
thinking.
of also female coded versus male coded? Like
It is,
the
yeah.
female coding would be thinking over feeling, and the difficulty with decoupling facts from emotions. I mean, women get tarred with that all the time. I think not undeservedly, although I know plenty of men who do that.
There was a
Or-
linguist, George Lakoff, years ago, who called the Democrat Party the mommy party, and the Republicans the daddy party. And so the Democrats are the ones who will care about you and give you what you want, and so compassionate and nice. And then the Republicans are like the stern, father type who, uses whatever, like disciplinary measures to
Right.
get you to
Sticks
do
and not
things.
carrots. Yeah.
Self-sufficient, and yeah.
And there's this like psychodrama that we're playing out where we're choosing between mommy and daddy every
Because they split up,
years.
because they got divorced. How about both?
Yeah,
We
they're
can't-
divorced,
obviously
they're
we
not
can't
getting along.
coexist.
we're
Yeah.
we're moving back between each house every
That's right. I mean, actually, that's a very good metaphor. Like the reaching across the aisle thing that you would see in
I mean, we got to renew our
Congress.
vows.
we should renew our vows.
We got to
Yeah.
renew the
Yeah.
vows, the Democrats and the Republicans.
Oh,
I think on the conservative side, I really think they underestimate how important emotion is. And when you think about why they lose arguments and why they don't win things they should, or why they're less persuasive, it often comes why they don't have the same cultural impact, why they don't like the things. So many
They're
of the
not
things are
artists.
said.
They can't do art.
But it's a big part of it is like all those are emotion driven things, and it's really important to have a rich emotional language for your view, or you're not going to resonate with like the groups that the left does well with, which is like women, young people.
Well, and the Trump coalition is very emotion based, though. I mean, I think when you say conservatives, I think you're talking about like traditional conservatives. You're not talking about like this.
Some emotions. There's a certain, but there is a certain like maybe it's more the obsessive versus hysterical thing. But there's some emotions that they do, but there's others they don't.
One of the critiques of this, of like, men, not so liberal conservative, more so the men who say women are so emotional. The critique is that, men are emotional too, but it expresses itself as anger. Anger is an emotion, and you often see men get very angry and express rage. Well, then it's like, why are you so emotional? Why are you so hysterical? Calm down, angry man. So, and I think there's that's like a valid response.
But it's like all in the obsessive compulsive people can get angry, but it's every negative emotion gets channeled into anger because it's like the only one, and so there's all these other emotions that are blocked and that they have trouble accessing. But
Yeah. Well, I like keeping my emotions at bay. I don't know about you, but it works for me most of the time. I'm happy to intellectualize.
You have to be. You think about emotions a lot, though. No.
Yeah, but I try to. I try to. Not let them get in the way too much. It's not good. No, it's not good. I think I'm definitely more on the. Let's try to make sense of this, rather than let's try to just sit with it. I think that's the problem. My problem. So, anyway, wow. All right. Well, let's talk about this more. I think there's more to unpack. So we'll come back.
Just full
to this, I'm
disclosure,
sure.
I didn't finish the chapter. I saved that reveal for the end. So I should finish reading the chapter, and we can continue this.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, then you're not that obsessive compulsive. If you finish the chapter, so well done.
Well, I did say I'm a naturally lazy person, so
I can't believe that. Anybody who follows you on Substack is going to find that very difficult to believe, Rob, because you are.
like I
very
said, I'm
high-content
overcompensating.
producing.
I'm overcompensating for like this fear that everyone's going to discover I'm lazy. So, I guess it's already out there now.
My problem with Substack is that they discover that they're actually paying for a subscription. So when they see you post, they unsubscribe. So there's that.
Yeah. I know. Yeah, those are tough moments when you start to see the line start to drop a little.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's not going to happen here because this great podcast, and I'm enjoying it a lot. So thank you both, as always, and we'll see you next week.
Thanks, Megan.